One Word is a production of BFAC On Air.
Welcome back, everyone, to One Word.
One word.
Boy, you know what? We just got to this point in it, and can you believe season 1 is almost over? We only have 2 episodes left.
I'm back next week for SpongeBob? No.
Next week
one
for
word.
SpongeBob.
One Word, the musical.
One Word.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a great one.
That would be
a
fun.
great one?
That's
Sing the
what
whole
next
time.
season is.
That's the next season. We're gonna sing
The
every
whole thing.
episode.
Yeah.
Yes, the whole thing.
It's a
We'll
treat
have a
for you,
piano
really.
player in the corner.
Did you know that there's actually podcast musicals?
Yes.
Yes.
Me
Zoe
and Chloe
and I-
listened to
Oh my
one.
gosh.
It was so good.
It was so good.
Which
It
one?
was
Good.
called 36 Questions
Oh,
with
yeah,
Jonathan
it's so
Groff.
good. Yes.
It's so
That's
good.
a plug. They didn't pay us.
If
to
Jonathan Groff
mention
is
that
listening,
one
first
right
of all, hi Jonathan Groff. Second of all, we love your musical.
now. Well, we had a pretty
Henry the
interesting
Duck.
episode here.
We did.
Yeah, so I found it's like have you ever had, this is for the listeners, okay?
Hey, listeners.
Have you ever had that moment in life where you've heard something so many times, but you never put its relevance together, or you never connected 2 dots to each other, even though they were when you're playing connect the dots as a kid, even though they're number 1 and number 2, you just never put those 2 dots together.
Yeah.
Have you ever- right? Well, that happens in this episode
Yeah, it does.
for me.
It's a good
and
one.
for me.
We talk about pecking order. I'm not going to go into it.
No.
Listen to the episode, and maybe as you're listening to it, you'll be like, Dominic, you are so dumb that you didn't know that's what that meant.
It
but-
really was a light bulb moment, though, for me, too.
Yeah, I wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
At least we'll put that out there,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. No, this is a fun episode. Well, not fun necessarily, but
We did get
It's
into
very real.
we got into a bit of sad topics. I mean, they're interesting topics and they're ones that are interesting to think about, but they're also a little sad. But sad doesn't mean bad. Sad doesn't mean bad.
That
right.
means let's think about it first.
Let's
that's
think
a great
about
way
it.
to put it. Let's think about it.
And I
for
think
a
there was a
second.
lot of cool history that I didn't necessarily realize before. Like when you hear this word, you're like, oh, okay, ostracism. But then delving into where it came from was just very intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And though the word sounds like ostrich, it has no direct correlation with animals,
Unfortunately.
unfortunately. But we do talk about ostracization.
Wow. You did a great job with that word.
Thank you. That we talk about that with animals.
Yes, with animals.
Ostracization.
Yeah.
We don't have
I'm
to look
looking
it
it
up.
up.
Let's
I'm
just
looking it
pretend
up.
I said it right.
And if you say it right, I think that we should have a new pronunciation of it,
Yeah.
just exclusively
That's what it is.
now, moving forward.
Hold on, I'm going to play the pronunciation of it. Dang it didn't come up. Never mind then.
Okay, that's great.
Ostracization. I
Great.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, it might be, as Chloe said, maybe it's a little sad, but I don't think it's sad with the intention of sad.
No.
No.
I think it is, if you're feeling those emotions, it's a good thing to stop and think what the word could do to someone else,
Mm.
and take those and make this uplifting by the actions you go forward with from hearing this episode. That's what I would say. That's what I would say about that.
Yeah. Also, we're here for you.
Yeah. Email us.
You can email us.
You can
We
email
will
us.
respond.
And that would be at BataviaFineArtsCenter.org.
That center
Spelled
CENTRE.
CENTRE.
Because we fancy.
We fancy like that. The RE makes us a little fancy.
Mhm.
That's a good way to remember
That
it.
was good.
Are you fancy?
I don't think there's any reason for me to talk any further. Without further ado, I just have one word for you: ostracize.
So today's word is ostracize.
Ooh.
Mm.
Yes, it is not about ostriches.
I thought it was at first.
I love an ostrich.
Right? The word
They're
ostracize.
very tasty.
Ew, what? Ew.
Oh, come
gosh.
on.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I don't know that.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that to be a fact. I just said it. Let's
Well,
just don't
Okay.
write in.
consider yourself ostracized
Okay,
for eating ostriches.
but I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
Oh, let me tell you.
Okay.
So the word ostracize. Now, Dominic's going to like this definition. The
Mhm.
first definition is to exile by ostracism.
So good.
Like what?
And
why,
now
why
you know,
say that?
right?
Why? Right?
We
Yeah.
talked about isms last month, so you guys should
We
remember what that
did
means.
talk about
Yeah.
isms. So the ostracize or ostracism is basically the method of banishing by
Mhm.
popular vote, and there's some history to this, by trial
Yeah.
or special accusation. This was practiced in ancient Greece. So there's actually, we're going to pull in another word real quick, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
There is a word called ostracon. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
No.
Okay,
Until
so
just now.
mine's everywhere. So ostracon is a piece of pottery that's usually broken off from a vase or a vessel. They're also kind of known
Yeah.
as like potsherds. So,
Oh, this part I knew of this part. I just didn't know of that word.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So the word ostracize came from ostracon because what people would do back in like ancient Greece, they would vote people off, but they would write their names.
You're voted off the island.
Yeah, on these pieces of like pottery on these ostracons. So
Yeah.
if your name was the general on the ostracons, then you were ostracized.
And they
Interesting.
Oh.
and they actually there's actual archaeological proof of this too. They've unearthed these massive like pits of things where they just have all this pottery pieces in these pits with people's names on them.
Interesting.
And that's their like the archaeological proof of the ostracism happening. And when was this happening?
This was happening like 1500s,
Yeah.
ancient Greece type thing, and it was basically if the people were like, it often was, or it started as being political, so it was like this political person
Yeah.
is not doing what we want, they're not doing what we say,
And sometimes it was out of danger.
yeah,
They were getting too powerful. The government or the entity was in danger.
Mhm.
And so an ostracism was necessary to stop this person.
yeah.
Yeah. Almost kind of like how we have hearings and things sometimes where, are we going to? Are we not going to? Is this person going to be eligible for to run again or not? It's
For to
it's,
run.
it's for to run
I know, I love
again
how you
or
said
not.
that.
You know what I mean? Right.
For to run.
And I do run. Thank you very much.
Nice job.
Yes. So let's talk. Let's talk about kind of ancient Greek politics and what they mean to us, because I feel like we need to understand some of what ancient Greek politics were
Okay,
to understand where we are today
sure.
to discuss all the things we want to discuss here, right? So
And to protect.
yes. So the ancient Greece, the ancient Greek people are really known for having the first democracy.
Right.
And I know you just broke down a word, but I'd like to break down another
When
word
you
for
really break it down.
I'm gonna break it down right now for you. I'm gonna break it down right here. I don't know.
That was, now
We
on
are
Spotify,
not. We are not rappers.
we are definitely not. No.
We're
So-
not rappers. We're podcasters.
That's it, girl. Yeah.
Ooh, go Jenna.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I digress.
So
Never apologize for that.
let's talk about democracia. Okay,
Ooh,
that is the original word.
democracia.
Yes, and Athens was the first democracia in the world, and that they actually influenced the ancient Romans and the Roman Republic
Right.
as we know it. So the last tyrant or tyrannos to rule Athens was Hippias, and he fled in the year 510 BC, and then a democracy and the democratic reforms started to happen. So democracy, so let's break that word down.
Okay.
The first part of it,
Demo.
yes, that is basically of the people, for the people.
Mm.
Okay. And then The second part of that word is basically government. So the government of the people. The people's government is what that basically is. And I'm going to talk about Aristotle again.
Mhm.
You know, we remember I spoke about Aristotle in the honesty episode.
Oh, yes, you
I did. Yes, I
Call
did.
back.
So if you want to hear more about Aristotle, you can look at it there. But basically, this was a belief that Aristotle had, that there was a natural law that certain essential rights superseded any laws written by humans. And the rule of law was important because it allowed individuals and institutions to be held accountable for their actions. And for all of us, by agreeing to follow these laws, it can prevent abuses of power by leaders who might act as if they are above the law, which is part of the reason for the ostracizing of people. Another important ancient Greek concept that influenced our forming here is the writing of a constitution. So in Athens, they had the Constitution of Athenians, and that created a common standard. So those are some of the things that came with us from the Greek population.
Okay.
But there are certain things that did not come with the Greek democracy and government.
Like ostracism?
Like ostracism or banishment. That is one of them, yeah. The ability to shout or hand raise votes, that
Okay.
did not come across either.
I'm so glad, because that would stress me out.
Wouldn't that stress
Be
you
like,
out if you could just shout at people?
Everybody calm down, okay?
Calm it down. Our democracy is similar in the city-state element of things,
Okay.
right? So the ancient Greek had all these city-states that would come together.
Why do you think banishment and ostracism was not something that came over? Like, why did that not continue?
You know, that's a great question. Maybe I'll be honest, maybe we answer that later on.
Okay. I like that. Because it just seems interesting where it's like, if they felt like it worked, well, I wonder if they did feel like it worked well. You know,
and there is something to say that perhaps with the banishment, the ostracism, that the people's vote, because part of the democracy that does transfer over is that, and I'm going to hold up finger quotes on this, people, that every person's vote counts equally to another's. I hold that up because we all know that it wasn't every person's. It was a lot of times wealthy people.
Yeah.
And in Athens, it started out that you had to prove that you were born there. You had to have one free parent. It started out as a mother. You had to have a free mother.
Oh.
Then it went to you had to have a free mother and father in order to vote.
Okay.
And we here you had to be a land-owning male to vote in the United States of America. So that's how that started out. What was I? What would you? Oh,
I was asking about like why it didn't come over. But I guess in a sense, if you look at it in a different way, it sort of did, because it's not necessarily banishing or ostracizing, but it is still taking that person out of power when we are voting. So
when we are voting, the
So it's
only
almost a
difference
sense of
that
it.
could be said, and in my research, they specifically reference the election with George W. Bush the first time, and how everyone was shocked that the majority of votes could go to Al Gore,
Right.
and George W. Bush got fewer votes, but the electoral yeah, and part of that reason is because we were framed as a republic, which means we have the electoral college, and we give our votes over to basically this electoral college, and that college is what votes for the president for us. So we were set up as a republic, not necessarily a democracy as the Greeks would have called it.
Right.
But yes, that vote, that's the same thing in some sense to that.
If we did still have ostracism,
Yes.
would you think, yeah, I gotta ostracize some people? You know, like I don't know.
Don't we do that?
Well, yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah. And Yeah, we do.
I think it's
I'm-
interesting because at the time that, ostracism was created, it wasn't seen as like negatively as we see it today. Because when you
Right.
think of someone now being ostracized, you think of that person like almost being ridiculed and like thrown out, like very mean-spiritedly. But back then it was just, you're not working for our government,
You're
so
not
we're just going to like
working.
politely ask you to leave.
You're a tyrant.
It's-
You gotta go.
Was
It's
it
very
polite?
different.
Do we know that? Like, was it polite? Was
it
it?
seems
Probably
polite,
not.
but I guess probably not.
I don't know
mean, I
that
feel like
anything.
it's reported politely.
if
but
they were
was it
screaming and
really?
shouting everywhere.
They were- yeah,
probably
right?
were. Polite for them,
Right?
which sounds rude. I'm sorry. Sorry, ancient.
A lot more
Grecians.
people too were in public life back then. It was something like I think in some of the research, it was something like a third of men at some point served in one capacity or another.
Interesting.
That is far more than what we would have today.
Oh yeah,
You know?
yeah. It almost feels like it's not the majority at all, or even like close to it, that serves in politics.
Yeah. And your terms in ancient Greece could be anywhere from 1 day.
What?
Yeah, as
Oh,
little as
interesting.
a 1 day term.
Oh, I'll
on
serve a
this
1 day
They're
item.
going to get a
term.
lot accomplished.
The other thing that came over, you really can't,
No.
was jury duty, for example. Jury duty is one of the things that comes from the ancient Greece as well.
Is that
Ancient Greece.
exciting, Jenna?
Yes. Let me tell you,
Have you been on a jury?
I've never been on a jury.
Oh, I've been on 2.
I know, and I'm so jelly.
The
So-
last one, I was cast as the jury foreman.
Which makes
I
so
say
much
cast
sense.
because
You were
It makes so
cast.
much sense.
I've never been on a jury. I've never been called for jury
Mhm.
duty. And I just want to write to them and be like, hello, available.
I'm available any date you need me.
Right?
Yeah.
Any time. I think it would be so much fun. One time I was in England.
Mm-hmm.
And they called you for jury duty.
And they
And they
did
said,
not.
"Oi, Jenna,
Oi.
you want to do a British jury?"
Wow, that was very cockney.
That
Wait,
was
no.
right. That person would not have asked for me to be on a jury. No, I was over there and I got to witness a case, and I just was so fascinated by it all, and like the wigs and stuff that they
Yeah.
wore. It was
Do they really wear the silly wigs?
Yes.
That's so
Wow.
fun.
Right. Anyway,
That is like a
Interesting.
production. They have been cast to be the judge.
They have
been
been.
cast.
Absolutely.
They wore those wigs well.
So, can I ask this question?
Please do.
Do we not, in our societies, have the ability in one way or another to still ostracize?
Oh yeah. I mean, we completely do. I mean, that's really right now a huge thing. Well, I'm almost 40, so I don't know if this is actually accurate anymore. I'm not in the know. But cancel culture
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
such a huge thing, and I think it's still such a huge thing,
Yeah.
that's basically ostracism, right? Where it's
Very
like
much.
somebody has done something that the masses on social media do not like. They get the other masses to basically be like, we are done watching, looking at, being a part of that person's thing, and canceling them, ostracizing them from society.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, so the reason of ostracism would be someone abusing their power or keeping them from having that political influence. I think from time to time that our pop culture icons and humans, not necessarily always just pop culture, but they have more influence on our lives and what we think, feel, do than politicians might sometimes. And so that kind of canceling, that ostracism is it taking them out of power?
Well, a lot of people like on the internet, especially like Twitter and YouTube, I think are where most cancel culture sort of happens. But I think a lot of people see it
That
as
also
like
came from ancient Greece, by the way, Twitter.
Twitter.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
Oh, I was like,
I
what?
was also.
Where is this going? But a lot of people see it as like their duty to kind of, if people are misusing their platform, to take that platform away.
Yeah.
But also, well, sometimes people like get canceled for reasons that are essentially unjust. So what gives the people who are doing the canceling the right to cancel?
That's
if
great.
that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And really I don't think, Jenna, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Mhm.
the definition and ostracism doesn't necessarily take that into account at all. It is just
Majority.
the popular
Yeah.
opinion
Whether
to
it's good or not.
ostracize someone or not.
Mhm.
So
Interesting.
rather than taking a poll or a vote, we're basically canceling, as we're saying here, by raising our Twitter hand
Mm-hmm.
or our Facebook hand. Is that kind of what we're saying?
Yeah, that kind of frustrates me. One of like the biggest things, like biggest lessons I've probably learned from my mom is just because a large group of people think one thing doesn't mean it's correct. And
And again, this goes back to the honesty podcast we had a couple times ago. We touched on similar things. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So it's just when it comes to things like that, I mean, especially now when the large groups of people are so quick to judge someone. And like, to be fair, there are some cases where like, yes, they deserve to be canceled, but there's enough evidence in cases where it was unjust that it just, I don't know. I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes when big groups of people get together, they get almost power hungry. And they're like, we have the power to end these people's careers. So why don't we for the smallest things?
And I feel like people word it that way too, right? Where it's like, we have the power. Go tell your friends. Let's get this person out of here. And
Yeah.
And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's very much not good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the things I researched before today's podcast episode was like influence on people and what some of like those biggest like factors are. And the number one thing of influence is people, like peer pressure and just like other people's opinions. And obviously social media is one of the biggest platforms to get your opinion out there, which like, I mean, it makes sense as to why then large groups of people are so quick to act and create opinions on things that aren't necessarily true. Because we also touched in a past episode of how quick false information is spread.
Yeah.
And it's another thing. And like entire group of people can believe this thing that's not even true. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus I think sometimes people are quick to be canceled because people want to feel included when not supporting someone.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is subconscious influence. One of the things I read was a psychologist who was talking about the website Behavioral Scientist says recognize that a patient the psychologist recognizes that a patient is depressed by examining our own moods once we finish interacting with them. If we feel depressed ourselves, a good chance still exists that they are too, which is I find very interesting on how we like are so influenced in this situation like mentally by another person without even like really knowing who they are, you know?
Yeah, that's it. So one of the things I found a gentleman by the name of Andrew H. Hales.
What was he doing?
He's a professor and he specifically studies ostracism.
What?
Interesting.
Yeah. And
He's our buddy this month.
He's our buddy this month. We should have had him on as a guest.
We should have.
And he does research and things based on how ostracism is painful and how threatening it is to the basic need to belong. And it's extremely true. So I'm going to give you a quote here from him, and this is from his research. After being ostracized, people are motivated to restore this need and achieve a sense of belonging. Troublingly, this suggests that ostracism can leave people vulnerable to recruitment into extreme groups. Just as unappetizing foods become appealing to someone who is especially hungry, extreme groups can become appealing to someone who is starved of social connection.
Interesting.
He goes on. He has these studies that he's did, but you can look them up. Andrew H. Hales is his name. It's very interesting,
And it makes
go ahead.
so much sense because it is like we're all looking for a family. We're looking for people who
My dad told me in one podcast we talked about how everybody wants to be loved, and he was like, "Chloe, you should have quoted Morrissey. I am human and I need to be loved."
Right?
That is
So
extremely.
that's for you, Dad.
There
It's
you go.
applicable too.
Yeah. So then if somebody is, I mean, that's one of the reasons why cults work. I'm not saying cults should work, but it's one of the reasons that cults work is because they're giving you this sense of, oh, you're not accepted by all these other people or things or whatever. Come to us, even if they're not necessarily doing the right thing all the time.
Right. So that here's where this comes from, because Andrew talks about things that push you towards feeling ostracized, not necessarily always being these big, massive things that you would think of as being ostracized. It's as simple as just not interacting with someone. Right. So how do we today, how we know about it, how do we think we ostracize people right now in daily life?
Well,
Is it as big as we think? Yeah. Go. You interrupt me anytime.
I looked a little bit into the silent treatment, which I think is
Ooh.
it's a way that we've kind of we've made a term for ostracization in our daily life. Thank you. I did well. And I think it's really interesting because, the silent treatment can be seen by some people as like childish, like I'm giving you the silent treatment, but by others it's seen as like taking the high road. Like if you have nothing left to say, if this argument is over, then just like stop talking.
Yeah.
And
It's a fine line.
it's a fine line, but also it can be considered emotional abuse when used in like liberal amounts, especially to children, because when children are deprived of like that love and that attention, especially by parents, it can be like really detrimental to them and their development. But I also found a really interesting little tidbit here, which is that women tend to handle it better. A quote here from an article I read on goodtherapy.org says, some evidence suggests women may respond differently to the silent treatment than men. For example, a study of workplace collaboration shows women were more likely to compensate or attempt to become even more proactive and communicative when ostracized from a group project, whereas men are more likely to give up or loaf.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Isn't it?
That is.
I have a story.
Yeah.
Ooh, I love stories.
So when I was in college, I think I was a freshman, my roommate and I, we were roommates all 4 years. We've known
That's nice.
Yeah, it was great. We were just put together. We didn't know each other before. But this one time, so she was in a psychology class, and one time we were walking back from the cafeteria, and she suddenly was just not talking to me, like not saying a word. And I would ask her questions, and I'd be like, Jess, this is this, Jess. And she just would like walk away or like turn to the other person.
What
Silent
did you
treatment.
do to her?
I know, right? All these things started going through my head of like, what did I do?
Yeah.
Why is she not talking to me? Did something happen in the last like hour that like I didn't realize? Like all of this stuff is going through
Can
my
I
head.
ask how you felt too? Because were you hurt?
Felt so hurt and like not just hurt, but I felt hurt at her, but also hurt at myself because in my head, obviously I have done something wrong.
Yeah.
Because this person isn't talking to me right now. I think at one point I even out loud said, because there was a group of us, I think I said, why isn't my roommate talking to me right now? And she just kind of like laughed and like walked away. And then I ended up like, we were going
So
to
she
like,
ignored you again.
she ignored me again. And so we,
I want to know her name right now. Can you please put it
Address?
in public? And we will
We'll take care of
cancel
it,
this
Jenna.
person right now.
You've got your
Cancel
back.
her.
so like they ended up, they were going to go play a game, but I just was like, I can't do this. And so I went back to my dorm and
You
went
retreated.
to sleep because that is how I cope with things. I sleep because if you sleep, then it's not bothering.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Sure.
So, because there's another group of people. So I've got Eric Weisselman and Kipling Williams. They've done some studies on this as well, specifically speaking on on ostracism and aggression and how ostracized people can become aggressive or hostile people. And basically they say that ostracism hurts and hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that ostracism, it drew you back into yourself.
Oh yeah.
Which means that you kind of go into this spiral. This is the spiral thing is something Andrew talks about in his research, and how one thing leads to the next, and you go back in, which takes you away from human connection.
Yeah.
And you kind of then can almost ostracize yourself, and then it just becomes this spiral.
Yeah.
And then you become aggressive, or you hurt people, or you're looking to fill that void with extreme things. It doesn't have to be extreme groups, but extreme things, perhaps.
I did not go to an
Excessive.
extreme group.
You didn't go to extreme
Thank
group,
God.
Good.
but if you went to sleep, perhaps you go and you extreme sleep.
Yeah.
or something like that.
Extreme sleep.
Extremes. That sounds like that could be a reality show.
I want to be on that.
Extreme sleep.
Yeah.
And it's
could be
kind of
bad.
like the whole bottling up your emotions type
Yeah.
thing too. Like it goes both ways. By not communicating what's bothering you with the other person, then it's going to bubble and you're going to get so angry, and then not understanding why the other person is angry
Yeah.
and not getting that. It's a painful cycle.
Has anyone else ever felt ostracized in any other? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll share a story. This was when I was a little kid. Okay. As you know, I wasn't the most normal little boy child that society would
Boy
have you
child.
be, right? That was not me.
He's wearing purple headphones right now.
I am.
Callback! Woo! That was good, Chloe.
Thanks.
So, and actually, so it was summer. We were outside. 2 doors down was a group of kids about my age, and they were playing with dolls on their driveway. They happened to be all girls. And I went over to play, and I was specifically told I could not play with them because I was a boy,
Yeah.
and playing with dolls was for girls. So because of this is going to sound terrible, but because of my maleness, I was ostracized from that group. I know being who I am gives me lots of privilege in the world, but at that moment, I was left out of something because of something I had no control of.
Yeah.
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 Does that make sense? So, I mean, how many little things ostracize people?
I think we've all felt ostracized, at least in a small way at some point.
Yeah.
Probably pretty often.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's difficult though. Like when in certain situations, sometimes it is better not to say anything. But so I am a very strong believer in communication. It's a key to solving all your issues. It's like a key to essentially your mind.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are just certain situations where you need a moment not to talk, and that's not. I don't know if that's essentially ostracizing, but it's kind of tying back to the silent treatment.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like I said earlier, it's a fine line.
Yeah, between taking the high road and giving the silent treatment.
Yeah.
I think, but I think it's even, it can go beyond silent treatment. How about not looking at someone
Yeah.
or not validating someone's ideas? Sometimes even some negative feedback is addressing a human being rather than just ignoring it.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings them in instead of makes them feel ostracized or outside of a group.
And I think being ostracized sometimes can be even dehumanizing. Because being loved and accepted by others is so necessary to humanity. So when you don't have that, it feels like you're losing your humanity.
Yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was just thinking about it all. It's so sad.
I was
I
thinking
don't
that
like
too. This is a sad
ostracism.
one.
It's so sad. But it's interesting too because we see it as humans, but it happens in nature too with animals.
Oh,
Yeah. And I was thinking about the ugly duckling, the story of
Yeah.
the ugly duckling,
Yes.
right? And thinking about how that, the ugly duckling was essentially ostracized, but then it kind of came into itself, right? But thinking about that in nature too, if you see an animal on its own, unless it's, for a reason for hunting or something like that, if you see an animal on its own, it's often because of either something that the animal has done or that animal is sick or, right? Something like that. So it's like the pack is then kind of protecting itself for survival by ostracizing this thing that has either become too aggressive or is past the point of
isn't
being
that
able
what
to be
all
there.
ostracism is in some sense, though?
Protection.
Well, sometimes, okay, not necessarily protection and survival, because my family used to have chickens, and you've heard about pecking order, I think it's what it's called, where it's just they all or I don't know what the term is when they actually end up pecking on the other
That is really
chick.
interesting. That is a term that I've heard forever.
I know.
Pecking order. And when you just put it in the same sentence as chickens,
I was like, wait a second.
I was like, wait, is that where pecking order comes
I'm pretty
from?
sure. I'm pretty sure because it's essentially the entire group of chickens will go and literally peck the smallest or the weakest or just one of the chickens until it dies. And we had that issue with our chickens. We named them all, and my favorite was Tiny because he was the smallest, or she was the smallest. And we had to remove her from the other chickens because they would all peck her, but she wasn't a threat to them.
That's so sad.
I guess I don't even know why they did it.
Well, can it be said that it is humane? Perhaps they could sense something that the animal wouldn't live. Is that a possibility? Like it's not going to live, it's suffering, just peck it to death?
Well, I've just Googled
Oh my
on my Google
gosh.
machine, I Googled pecking order phrase, origin.
Yes, baby.
And I came up with like a description of social behavior among chickens, and they attack each other by pecking to establish dominance.
It's to establish dominance.
So not
Just
necessarily
like politicians.
to be humane. Yeah.
So that's where I was going with it. You know, when animals are doing that for survival, isn't that why ancient Greece would
For survival.
ostracize people?
Yeah.
For the survival of their government?
Right.
We must stop this person. We must get them out. We must remove them for a period of time so that our community, our way of living may continue. And isn't that what cancel culture is essentially doing? It's in essence canceling a person, an idea, a thought, so that a way of living, whether right or wrong, can continue and thrive. This ostracism can be something which propels our societies to what we desire them to be, whether right or wrong, just most popular, right? Just
Right.
most popular. Doesn't have to be right or wrong, although I think historically it is rooted in the just Aristotle way, the way that is ethical and right. But on a different level of it, when we take that to our everyday social existence with people, I think what we do when we ostracize on these micro levels, these little levels of not acknowledging someone, ignoring them, no eye contact, not talking when someone's upset and
When
leaving
you're
you
right
hurt.
there. Why would you talk to me?
We create the next society of people who are going to need to be ostracized because they go out looking for human interaction and acknowledgement. They go out and find, as research might say, they go out and find extreme things or ways to cope with, whether it's extreme ideas and extreme groups, or if it's sleeping too much or drinking too much, right? There are all these things that we're creating more aggressive and hurt people who are going to need ostracism when they wouldn't have if we hadn't done micro ostracisms to them at times when it was unnecessary. So when we see people and they're hurt, or we see people and they're angry, why? Do we ever stop to think that perhaps the reason is because they don't feel they belong anywhere, and that we could just change a little bit of that? Walking down a street, smiling at someone, is a positive way to make them feel connected to humanity. We don't always know how our small, everyday choices really matter. And you can matter to 300 people if you make them feel connected to humanity.
Very true. Because really, like, that belonging, we talked about this earlier, but that belonging is necessary for us. It's necessary
Yeah.
for our survival.
Yeah. Everyone, make people feel connected to you in the smallest way possible. Then, maybe, just maybe, we won't need to cancel. We won't need to ostracize if we try to make people feel connected to humanity. Well,
well.
that brings us to the end of this month's episode.
Happy April, y'all.
It's my birthday
springtime.
month.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Oh, so we will see you for our season finale next month.
It's gonna be May.
It's gonna be
May.
May,
It's gonna be May.
where our word will be legacy. I am Dominic,
I'm Jenna.
I'm Zoe.
And I'm Chloe.
and you've been listening to the 9th episode of One Word. See you next month.
One Word is a production of BFAC on air.
Do your song, Jenna. Don't. Do your song. Sing your song, please.
Come on, right
No.
Yeah,
Come
what's
on,
your
sing
song?
Jenna, please.
Come on.
I don't even know if I remember it. Okay, now I remember it. The word ostracize is not about ostriches, but you can ostracize an ostrich, yes sirree. But if you ostracize that ostrich with an ocellated ice fish, then you've ostracized the ostrich to the sea.
Oh.
It's so good. Yes, Jenna. Yes. Jenna.
Oh my word. I didn't want to do it.
But
We're
you
glad
did.
you did.
Yeah.